Okay, can you tell us your full name, please?
Dave Roberts.
Excellent. And Dave, what job did you actually have here at Apex?
I was actually the first project coordinator of the Apex Leicester project. I was recruited in the autumn of 1982 to start the project. Originally, we had a desk and a telephone at the VSO offices on Regent Road in Leicester.
Can you tell us what dates you were here?
I think September or August 82 till the end of, or the beginning of 1980. Halfway through 84, summer 84.
Okay. Now, obviously, I'd like to focus on the ex-offender roles and things like that Apex was set up for. Can you tell us, from your view, the overriding memory from those days of working with ex-offenders at that point?
Well, it was quite an interesting job for me at the time, because I'd moved out of managing a homeless hostel, or hostel for homeless people, and many of those were ex-offenders. So for me, it was a natural progression, because that was another area of those people's lives, their employment opportunities, training opportunities. And clearly, at the time, and it's still the case today, that it's a particular group of people in society who are discriminated against in terms of employment opportunities, many leaving prison, and there was clearly a relationship between the lack of employment opportunities and reoffending and return into the penal system. So I remember reading the advert thinking, at last someone's doing something about another aspect of these people's lives, not just their accommodation but their employment. So I applied, obviously got the job, and we had to really start building the service up from the ground up. So all those functional relationships had to be made, both with the probation service, with the prisons themselves. We had to do the initial persuasion, I suppose, for prison, not just obviously senior prison staff, but prison officers were absolutely crucial if the scheme was going to work. We had to develop those relationships and get prison staff on board, with quite a degree of success, in the sense that I think some of our certainly early courses involved prison staff in the course. So we did joint courses with both prisoners and prison staff, and prison staff increasingly took a bigger role in those training courses. So there was training which was about interview techniques, giving prisoners or ex-offenders a view of what the local labour market was like. There was a lot of confidence building in terms of doing what you're doing now, filming them, playing back how they presented themselves, mock interviews, a whole range of things, advice on benefits and housing as part of a broader package of support for them when they came out of prison. We selected some prisoners who were a bit more entrepreneurial to maybe look at setting themselves up in their own businesses as a way forward. And I think we did the initial trawl of the other side aspect was employment placing, drawing up CVs. Presumably the organisation still does it now, draws up CVs.
You're not saying anything we don't do yet.
Deals with the offence in the context, and obviously, but focus on the individual in terms of their skills and potentialities as potential employees. And then we did the initial trawl of the local employers. So trying to get employers to view ex-offenders on their merits rather than focus on their crimes, and get them involved as much as we can with the project. And we had Severn Trent were a big employer at the time. They chaired, one of their personnel managers chaired the initial committee. Everard's Brewery were represented on the committee, so we started building those relationships. And that was a good piece of work as well. That seemed to work well.
Can I ask you, 30 years on,
Yes.
we're asking, sorry to mention your age, 30 years on, we're talking to people about the role that Apex has played in their life as maybe helping them to come out of a difficult situation or gain employment or a skill that they were needing for whatever reason, multitude of reasons people come through the door. as an employee, former employee of Apex, how has your career gone since then with the 5 years that you did here? Did you carry on working with ex-offenders? Did you take things from here and did it shape other things that you did afterwards?
That's a good question. It did shape other things after, almost directly, because in the early 80s I was with a partner keen to move, to escape from Leicester and move to South Wales. And we'd been on several summer holidays in South Wales, and we'd sort of liked Swansea and Mumbles. And just on a whim, I put my CV into the local job centre into Swansea. And about 3 or 4 months later, I got a phone call from Swansea Job Centre. It sounds bizarre, doesn't it? The job centre rings you up. and you know, this was in the early 80s with mass unemployment at the time. So I had a phone call from Swansea Job Centre. Mr. Roberts said, you submitted your CV, and we were just looking at your current employment, where you're involved in a project which is finding and developing employment opportunities and training for ex-offenders. Well, there's a very similar project that's just opened up, is opening up in Swansea, looking for a project coordinator. And it's called the Welsh Initiative for Specialised Employment. But instead of doing it with ex-offenders, you're doing it with people with learning difficulties. But it's almost a perfect match, because they're looking to develop small businesses with families of people with learning difficulties to find them employment opportunities. They're looking for breaking down the barriers of discrimination that people with learning difficulties have vis-à-vis employers. They're looking at developing a whole range of skills for those people. And your CV just matches, your Apex profile matches, yes, would you like to apply for the job? So I went, applied for the job, and got it on that basis. And it was the structure was similar, it was just a different client group. I then returned to Leicester. I got involved in community education service and youth work, and many of the youth projects we're involved in would have included ex-offenders or future offenders. And I've gone on to manage a large community education centre, and never really left behind the experience I've had at Apex in terms of what I understand about offenders generally, what I understand.
Now, obviously, 30 years since you were here, 25 years, shall I say, since you were here. You know, it's still going strong, Apex. It's still providing services to a similar client group, and in fact expanded the service that he has, and obviously this fantastic building that we're in. Do you think it's just as needed now as when you worked here?
I think it's probably more needed now. I just think there's a whole set of different pressures on young people, particularly at the moment. There's still we have, you know, mass levels of unemployment, particularly 16 to 26-year-olds. There is still we've got the largest prison population in Europe. All of the features of society that existed in the 80s that Apex was brought into existence to try and address are still there. And you know, I'm glad to see that the organisation is also still here and still addressing not just, you know, the small niche that we were addressing in the 80s, but a much bigger organisation.
Okay, final question. There's been proposals in the last 2 weeks for probation services to be outsourced to local organisations, charities, third sector, that kind of stuff, as well as private companies being allowed to bid for it, like Serco and Group 4. What's your view on people that are at the early stages of offending or in a bit of a revolving door with less than 12-month sentences being able to be serviced by local organisations?
I think partnerships are, you know, A, inevitable, and B, the way forward. I mean, the Apex partnership was sponsored by the probation service, and we were seen as an organisation that was providing additional services, and services in a way that the probation service at the time could not provide. And because we were independent of the penal system, then I think that was important for the client group. It was easier for us to engage with ex-offenders and offenders, because we weren't the probation service, we weren't the probation office. So I think there's a role for the voluntary sector. I personally have always had a problem with private companies that need to come in and make profits, because I've spent my life in and around, either in the voluntary sector or in and around the non-profit sector. And I know that if the motive and the imperative of an organisation is also to make a profit for shareholders, etc., that is a piece of resource that is not going to the client group, and these services remain heavily underfunded.
Thank you.